Shalom, and welcome again to Parsha Highlights and Insights. This week, we have not one but two Parshiot. We join together the Parsha of Matot and the Parsha of Massei. That's the joining together that we do this year. From time to time, Parshiot are doubled up, as it were, in order to make it possible for certain parshiot to come out during the year at specific times. And what we're aiming for is for Parshat Devarim, which is the at the beginning of the book of Devarim, to be read on the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. And when we come to that, we'll talk about it. But in order to make sure that that happens this year, we combine Matot and Massei, read them together, and in that way, the following week, we'll have Parshat Devarim just before Tisha B'Av. But first, let's look at Matot and Massei. So Matot and Massei together is really a rather long Torah reading. Combined, it's really very, very long. And what I've done here in our little outline is I've put some of the major themes of the two parshiot, first of Matot and then of Massei. Now, in a very general sense, what we're doing in these two parshiot is we are completing the major themes of the book of Bamidbar, and we're really on the threshold of the entry of the Jewish people into the land of Israel. It is not Moshe, but it will be his successor, Yehoshua, who will take them across the Jordan River in order to enter the land. But that's how we are completing the book of Bamidbar with Matot and Massei. A lot of the topics that we're going to see are very obviously preparatory for that crossing over. But the first of the parshiot, or the beginning of Parshat Matot, has a topic that at first glance doesn't seem to fit, although it's a very important topic. So let's begin with that, and we're talking about the topic of vows. A vow, in Hebrew it's called a neder. A vow is a promise that a person makes either to do something or not to do something. Often it involves a prohibition. It's not the only type, but it often deals with a prohibition where a person makes a commitment, sometimes because they want to remind themselves of what's important, and they feel they have to make this commitment in order to really commit themselves to it. Sometimes it could be in a moment of emotion, but one way or the other, a person makes a vow, as I said, either to do something or not to do something. And the Torah says that the first obligation is that when a person makes a vow, he is required to fulfill it. It could be a vow, a commitment to bring a sacrifice, for example. Makes a commitment that he's going to bring a certain sacrifice. He is required to do it, and there's a time limit by which he must fulfill that vow. I should also mention the fact that the reason why it's called Matot, which means the tribes, is because in this very first section, Moshe is addressing the heads of the various tribes and telling them to, of course, to teach Bnei Israel, teach children of Israel, about all of these laws of the importance of vows. First, as I said, of fulfilling vows. The fact that it's addressed not only to the individuals, but also to the leadership might suggest that the responsibility of vows is not a purely individual responsibility. It's also communal. It also has an effect on the relationship of the individual to the community, um, to that person's family or the larger community, and therefore the heads of the tribes are brought into the picture, as it were, to make sure that people know that they have to fulfill their commitments. There's a special section in the laws of vows about women whose vows can be annulled. A married woman's vows can be annulled, canceled by her husband. And an unmarried woman who is still living at home, she's below a certain age, her vows can be annulled or canceled by her father. Um, if, however, she is neither of those, she's no longer living under her father's responsibility, and she's not married yet, or she's no longer married, she's widowed, divorced, then there's no way of annulling the vow. And the annulling means that the man in question is able to declare that the vow is to be null and void. So a woman's vows can be canceled, and that helps her, because if she took the vow in a moment of emotion, or some without possibly maybe not even realizing the effect that it's going to have, then that means that she is no longer bound by it. Now, why are the laws of vows here in this last section of the book of Bamidbar, which, as I said, most of it has to do with the preparation for the crossover into the land of Israel? Well, I think in a foreshadowing sense, the Torah is telling us you're about to very soon, in a matter of months, cross over into the land of Israel, and you're going to be living a very, very different kind of life that you've been living in the desert. The desert has been a life of open miracles. You're not going to be living in a life of open miracles anymore. There will be God's support, but that will not be in the form of open miracles. It will be more concealed miracles. You're going to be building a society. You're going to be building communities, tribes, and all the way up to a general society. That entire society is really going to be based in large measure on people keeping their word, people making commitments and fulfilling their commitments, because that's really the basis upon which any responsible society is built. And we'll see examples of that coming up as we conclude. By the time we get to the very end of the book of Bamidbar, uh, we'll see some other commitments that are going to be made. So in a sense, this section on vows, on nidarim, serves as a kind of a foreshadowing of events that are going to occur soon after. The next section of Matot is the war against the Midianites. We'd heard about this before. The Midianites were the ones who had provoked Israel into immorality, which led to idolatry, which led to God's anger against the children of Israel. And so it is avenging the honor, as it were, of Bnei Israel, and also the honor of God, because the Midianites, through their actions, um, forced a wedge between God and Israel, and that's something that has to be punished. And so the Midianites are to be attacked. Remember that Moshe married somebody from Midian, but nevertheless, God says that he is supposed to command the people into this battle, and he does so. First, there is a major attack, and the Midianites are completely completely destroyed. Um, and then the warriors, and I should have mentioned that for the war, 1,000 warriors per tribe are selected for the for this force that is going to fight against Midian. After the war is over, the warriors bring back the spoils, and the spoils are in the form of material spoils, but also in the form of captives, women and children. And it's at this point that Moshe rebukes the warriors, because the women had been the ones, the women of Midian had been the ones who were directly involved in luring the children of Israel towards that immorality. They should not be spared, and so they are not. Now, after the war, the various everything that was involved in the war has to be purified. Those things that came into contact with the dead, and people who came into contact with the dead, have to be purified. So the people are to be purified, and we learned about that a few chapters ago in Parshat Chukat, about if someone had been in contact with the dead, they remain tamei, ritually impure, for a period of 7 days, and on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, they are to be sprinkled with spring water that has ashes from the red heifer in it. That's how the people are to be purified after war. And the vessels also have to be purified in a similar way. But in addition, the vessels that they captured in war have to be dealt with in 2 ways. One, what we call purging, or hachshara. These are, let's say for the sake of argument, cooking vessels, cooking utensils that were used by the Midianites, presumably to prepare food that wasn't kosher. So what happens when food has been prepared in a vessel, but that food isn't kosher? So the Torah teaches, and this is the basis for halacha, how to purge many, not all, many vessels of whatever unkosher food that it has absorbed. Basically, the rule is that the manner in which it was used is the manner in which it purges. So if it was used to cook liquid, so it is purged by boiling liquid. If it was used in direct contact with the fire, so it is purged by means of direct contact with fire as well. And along the way, we learn about this rule that unkosher food, or food that a Jew is not allowed to eat for one reason or another, in general we'll call that unkosher, is, if it's been absorbed into the utensil, then it has to be removed before a Jew can use it. Some vessels can't be purged if they're made out of earthenware, because they absorb unevenly and are not purged so easily, and so instead they just have to be smashed. And in addition, these vessels have to be immersed in a mikveh, and at least Rashi says that this is the source of the law, that when one acquires a vessel, even if it's a brand new vessel, it's 2 separate laws, that was earlier in the possession or the manufacture of a non-Jew, then before a Jew's allowed to use it, he has to immerse it in a mikveh. That's called tevilat kelim. Now, after the war, there are very clear instructions that a portion of the spoils have to be dedicated, donated to the precincts of the Mishkan for holy purposes. So first, an inventory is taken, and it's a long inventory of all the various things that are taken, and then what portion, what percentage we might say, what fraction is to be donated, and then they are offered to the use of the Mishkan. Just reminding everyone that the success in war, the victory in war, requires that we dedicate ourselves to God and dedicate our victory and be thankful for a victory to God. In a sense, this brings us back to that theme of vows, because these items are dedicated to Hashem. They're dedicated to the Mishkan, which is a kind of a vow. The next section talks about the territory that is to the east of the Jordan River. This is territory that has already been conquered, and the issue is how to deal with that territory. It is observed that the territory that had been conquered, and we learned about that in the past, conquered from Sichon and from Og and the territory of Yazer, that territory in general is very good grazing land. And as it happens, two of the Shvatim, two of the tribes, namely the tribe of Reuven and the tribe of Gad, are tribes that have an exceptionally large amount of cattle, of flock and herd, and this would be very, very good land. Now, the point is that Reuven and Gad, with all of the other tribes, were meant to take their portion of the land on the other side of the Jordan, to the west of the Jordan, not to the east of the Jordan, which is where they were. But what they say they make a request. Reuven and Gad make a request, make a presentation before Moshe and the leaders, saying that do not make us cross over the Jordan to take our territory. We have large holdings of sheep and cattle and goats. This would be a better territory for us. Moshe rebukes them, and the reason for the rebuke is the way it seems is that they don't want to even cross over the Jordan, which would suggest that when all of the other tribes will cross over the Jordan to participate in the wars of conquest and the process of dividing the land, that Reuven and Gad would stay on the east of the Jordan. And Moshe's rebuke, which is words that are very very moving, is, will your brethren go to war and you'll remain here? And first of all, that would be, as we would say, unfair. But Moshe points out that the repercussions of that could be disastrous, because it would cause the other tribes to be afraid of crossing over the Jordan. And Moshe repeats what had happened in the earlier generation, that when the scouts returned from the exploration of the land of Israel, and they said that we can't do it, then that brought about the result of people losing faith in themselves and faith in God. And as a result, they've been traveling in the desert for 40 years for a whole generation to die and a new generation to be born. And Moshe is saying, you sound just like that. Reuven and Gad responds to Moshe, and they correct themselves. They say, it's not clear whether they say we always meant this or we accept your rebuke, Moshe, and we will do the following. But their response is, we will go together shoulder to shoulder with all of the other tribes of Israel we will cross over the Jordan, and we will participate fully in the conquest of the land. And what we will do is we will build places right now for our animals to live, as well as places for our families to live, while we go across and participate in the war. Moshe corrects them um, by pointing out that they reverse the correct order. They said, we'll build for our animals and we'll also build for our families. And Moshe says, build for your families and also build for your animals. Let's remember what really comes first. Of course, you have to support your families. A financial basis is important. But in terms of priority, in terms of what's important, you have to list your family first. That's why you're doing all of this. So he then makes a proposal and he says, and this is where we once again have the theme of vows. He says you have to make a commitment that you will fight side by side with the rest of your brethren in the conquest of the land. And remember, this is it's important for Moshe to demand this of them, because Moshe, is not going to be around when this will be fulfilled, because Moshe has been told he's not going to cross over to the other side of the Jordan. He's going to die, and so it's a commitment they're making, not so much to him, but to the entire people of Israel. And he states it. He states the proposal in positive and negative terms. If you fulfill your commitment, then you will receive this territory to the east of the Jordan. But if you do not, then you will not receive it. And you'll receive your portion on the west of the Jordan, just like everybody else. They accept the conditions. Decision is made. The terms are fulfilled. The terms are accepted, and it is fulfilled. It's fulfilled in the sense that Moshe says that the territory to the east of the Jordan is going to be the territory of Reuven and Gad. And he does one more thing. He adds to the territory east of the Jordan half of the tribe of Menashe, and they're there. Not the entire tribe of Menashe. Menashe kind of straddles the two sides of the Jordan, one to the east and one to the west. And we're told that the addition of Menashe, who are scholars, will help to make sure that Reuven and Gad are not exclusively concerned with material matters, that they're also going to be concerned with spiritual, with Torah matters as well. And then towards the end of Matot, we are told specifically which cities will be, which belong to Gad, which belong to Reuven, and also the tribe of Menashe, which territory belongs to Menashe. And Menashe even does some additional conquest and devotes the land to that tribe, half of the tribe of Menashe, the half that's on the east of the Jordan. But Bnei Israel basically are encamped in a place. I mentioned this last time. They're camped just to the north of the Dead Sea, just to the north of the Yam HaMelach, a place that's called the plains of Moav. That's where they are right now. On the other side of the Jordan from where they are, they can actually see Yericho. They can see Jericho. That's where they are. So they've essentially reached the end of all of their journeys, and they're just preparing to move on to the next stage. The next Parsha is called Massei, and as I said, we read Massei as well. And Massei begins, Massei itself means travels or journeys, and it is a recap, begins with a recap of all of the travels of the children of Israel. It's a summary of the 42 stages, the 42 places that they traveled from Egypt up until this point. A number of place names are mentioned, some of which we do not know to this day exactly where they are, but we know that they're somewhere in between. And God has led them from one place to another, especially after the sin of the scouts that made it necessary for them to remain in the desert. I never like when people use the term that they wandered in the desert. It makes them sound like they were lost. They didn't wander. They weren't lost. They were being led by Hashem from place to place in order to live out the rest of their existence, that generation, until they get to this place. And there are 42 stages. And Moshe records all of those various places uh, that they encamped in, and from which they traveled to go on to the next stage. The next major part of Massei, and this is really bringing us up to the end of the Parsha and the end of the book of Bamidbar, is the preparation of crossing the Jordan River, again, the Yarden, which will happen after the death of Moshe. And they are commanded that when they cross the Jordan River, they are to take possession of the land. Not here, but elsewhere, we are told that they do offer, that they are required to offer peace to the inhabitants, and that means, or can mean, among other things, that if they want to leave rather than engage in war, they will be allowed to leave and nobody will stop them. But if there's war, then it's total war. And among the things that are mentioned here and emphasized here are that as they're conquering the land for themselves, they are also required, commanded to destroy every example of idolatry that remains in the land. This is a holy land, and the land itself doesn't tolerate idolatry, especially the kind of idolatry that took place in Canaan. We're told about human sacrifice and other objectionable practices. So every form of idolatry is to be obliterated, and then settle the land, and also apportion the land using a lottery. It's another point that's been made before, but it's made again, that when it comes time to assign which parcel of land goes to which family, it is to be done by means of a lottery, so that God will be involved in the process. God will be guiding the lottery to see to it that the appropriate piece of land goes to the appropriate family. And this section ends with a warning, reminding them that if they do not do what's being laid out here, conquering, settling, destroying idolatry, if they don't do that, then whatever remains and whichever people remain in the land, if they're still idolaters, will become very, very difficult for the children of Israel to manage. They will constantly be having difficulties. And the truth is that if, as we look on in the later books of the Tanakh and the book of Yehoshua and beyond, we see that those territories that they were not able to conquer and where there were still idolaters remained difficult. So it's a warning. It's at this point that we're given very, very careful details about the boundaries of the land of Israel. Not which tribe goes where, that doesn't exactly happen now, but the boundaries based on physical boundaries, on bodies of water, based on mountains, or based on a line that connects one city with another. It's all very carefully laid out, and you can find maps that will give you an idea of what that land is to be. And within this section, we're told that each tribe is to be represented by a specific prince, and his name is mentioned here, and they will be involved in the process of dividing the land. They will stand for each one of the tribes for the eventual division of the land. Now, the tribe of Levi is not given territory, in the sense of farming land, but they are given cities. And the Torah says here that there are to be 48 cities set aside for the Levim, with territory around each city for them to use. Not only residential area, but this territory around. Now, what are the 48 cities? Well, 6 of them are cities of refuge, and we're going to talk about cities of refuge very soon. But 6 of them are cities of refuge, 3 to the east of the Jordan, and 3 to the west of the Jordan. And there will be scattered throughout the entire territory of Israel, 42 additional cities, for a total of 48 cities for the Levim. Remember that on his deathbed, Yaakov said that the tribe of Levi is to be scattered, because when Levi is together, their passion can be dangerous. Well, now they've learned how to harness their passion for the service of Hashem, but they're still to be scattered. So rather than being in one place, they are throughout the entire territory of Israel. I mentioned cities of refuge, so that's what comes up right now. The Torah here deals with laws connected with murder, murder that is committed inadvertently, meaning not entirely accidentally. It's called bishogeg. A person has a certain degree of responsibility for it having happened, but it certainly was not premeditated. And if a person kills somebody else under those circumstances, then both so that he would be safe from the family who might seek vengeance, and also in order to atone for this life that has been lost, the person who did this has to go to one of the cities of refuge. We learn here about how the cities of refuge are spaced out on the 2 sides of the Jordan, 3 on one side, 3 on the other, and these are places where they will be accepted and they'll be safe from the families of the person who has died. And sometimes it's necessary for there to be judgment, for the court to get involved in determining whether this person deserves to be in one of the cities of refuge, or whether they've committed premeditated murder, in which case they have to be tried. So the judges are involved in that. Towards the end of this section, it's really the very end of the book of Bamidbar, but it's still connected to this anticipation for crossing over. We have an argument that is presented by the children of Gilad regarding the daughters of Tzolofchad. Remember, Tzolofchad had died in the desert, but he is entitled, or his descendants are entitled, to territory in the land, and his brethren, the children of Gilad, division within the tribe of Menashe, they come forward. What had happened was, it was taught that the daughters of Tzolofchad, the 5 daughters of Tzolofchad, are to inherit their father's territory. But their relatives make the argument that if the daughters of Tzolofchad, who are currently unmarried, marry somebody from another tribe, then that means that the land that they will have inherited will go to another tribe. And so Moshe makes a decree. And it's understood that this is a decree that applies to this generation alone, the generation of the conquest and apportioning of the land, that under these circumstances, the daughters of Tzolofchad, or indeed any other woman who inherits in this way, must marry within her tribe. It's a decree that is of limited duration, meaning after that generation, there would be no limits as to whom a woman may marry, but under these specific circumstances, they're required to marry only within their tribe, and we're told that they fulfill this. They all marry within their tribes. They marry relatives. And so we come to the conclusion, which is just one final verse that says that these are all of the mitzvot that were given to the children of Israel on their on the border of crossing over into the land of Israel. Now, that theme of vows and commitments, I think, is very important for this time. Uh, the vows that are the commitments that are made by the warriors, the commitments that are made by Reuven and Gad, the commitments that are made by the daughters of Tzolofchad. But I'd like to go back to a section where in the parasha where we're told where Hashem tells Moshe that when you cross over the land, you have to conquer the land and destroy all of their idolatry, um, and take possession of the land. And I'd like to focus on these words: "Vehorashtem et haaretz," you shall take possession of the land. "Vishavtem ba," and you will settle in it. "Ki lachem natati et haaretz lareshet ota," because to you I have assigned this land for you to possess. And what I've included here is a comment by the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. The Ramban says, and we'll just read what he says here. He recognizes that there are two ways of reading this. One way of reading this is to say that the time will come for you to take possession of the land and dwell in it. It's a prediction of what is about to happen. And that is more or less the way that Rashi reads it. But the Ramban says it's more than that. It's not just a prediction of what is to happen. It is actually, in the Ramban's opinion, a mitzvah. He says, "Al da'ati," in my opinion, zo mitzvat asehi. Mitzvat asehi. This is a positive commandment. According to the Ramban, the commandment to take possession of the land, is one of the Taryag mitzvot, one of the 613 mitzvot. I should point out, not everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that it's important to live in the land of Israel, but the Ramban goes so far as to say that living in the land of Israel in and of itself and taking possession of the land is a mitzvah. And here's the way he says it. He says it here. He says it in other writings of his. How is this mitzvah to be fulfilled? Yitzaveh otam, it would command them, sheyeshavu ba'aretz, that they must dwell in the land, v'yirshu ota, and take possession of it, ki hu netana lahem, because he, meaning God, gave it to them, v'lo yimasu b'dachalat Hashem, and they should not abhor, they should not reject God's inheritance. It sounds like this is a mitzvah, according to the Ramban, which devolves not on the individual, but on the community. But every member of the community is involved in that. So the mitzvah is actually for the people of Israel to accept and willingly take possession of and dwell in the land. According to the Ramban, the living in the land of Israel is more than just a precondition for the fulfillment of other mitzvot. It is a mitzvah in and of itself. And the way that it is fulfilled is living in the land and doing what is necessary in order for the people to hold on to the land. And he explains, the ilu ya'aleh al da'atam, if it were to occur to them, to the people of Israel, lalechet v'lichbosh eretz shinar or eretz ashur v'zulatan, if it were to enter their minds to go and conquer, let's say, the land of Shinar, which is another name for the land of Babylon, or the land of Ashur, which is Assyria, or some other place, and ulihityashev sham, and to settle there, in other words, to make another place on the globe other than the land of Israel into the land of the Jewish people, then ya'avru al mitzvat Hashem, they would be in violation of God's command. Now, not everybody agrees to this reading. The Rambam, for example, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, does not count living in Eretz Yisrael as an independent mitzvah in and of itself, although he recognizes that it is a necessary precondition of the fulfillment of many other mitzvot, and it's certainly to be recommended to live there. But it's the Ramban who is the real champion of regarding the living in the land of Israel, and especially the people of Israel, making the land of Israel into their homeland. The Ramban is the one who says that this constitutes an independent mitzvah unto itself. And the Ramban, who lived in the 13th century in Spain, was able towards the end of his life to fulfill the dream of coming to the land of Israel, and he spent the last years of his life living as he always wanted to in the land of Israel. So at this point, after Matot and Massei, we come to the end of the book of Bamidbar, and we are standing on the threshold of the entrance into the land of Israel. But we have a whole other book, a whole additional book to read before we get to that point. That will be the book of Dvarim, which will be Moshe's final words to Bnei Israel before he departs from them. But at the end of the reading of the book of Bamidbar, that we say, as we do at the end of every book of the Torah, Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek, be strong, and let us strengthen ourselves, just as we have strengthened ourselves by reading and learning one book of the Torah. So we should strengthen ourselves by continuing to learn all of Torah. Thank you all very much. Shalom, and look forward to speaking with you next time. Shalom.